You guys, this afternoon, I want to talk to you briefly about a tough subject. One that we're facing in our world today, in our culture, one that you're very familiar with. It's not a subject that I'm going to throw out there today. You're like, oh, I've never heard of that. This is new to me. And we all wake up every day and we're faced with the reality of truth. We're faced with the reality of the culture. And this is a really difficult topic to talk about, to understand, and to come around. Because when we talk about truth, you guys, sometimes it's really hard to receive the truth. Sometimes it's hard to understand the truth. And sometimes there's things that we're struggling with even in our own life that when we hear the truth or we come around the truth, it's really difficult to accept. So I'm not going to ask you today just to say, oh, I'm just going to believe everything Paul says or I'm going to accept it. I know that all of us in this room struggle in some way with something in our life, or we know someone who might struggle in some area of their life when it comes to truth. I mean, even in my own life, you guys, this topic is difficult. I always say I come from a family with 4 Ds: divorce, death, disease, and dysfunction. I grew up with it. I grew up with all those things in my life and not always knowing how to navigate around people's decisions, things that they did, and understanding like what's the truth, what's real. Like just because my parents did this, does that mean that it's really true, or family members or friends? And the reality is, guys, when we talk about the truth, we have to talk about it in a way that we can fully understand it, a way that really penetrates our being and our heart. I work on a college campus, the University of Louisiana, and the latest statistics show that 5 years after high school seniors graduate, 5 years after graduation, 70 to 80% are no longer going to church. So I work on a college campus that years later, this is the place where young people lose their faith. Like all of a sudden, they just stop forgetting what truth is. They stop forgetting what faith is about, what relationship with God is about. So what I'm saying is if you fast forward even your life or the people in this building 5 years from now, 70% of you statistically will just stop going to church. Now, does this prove that truth doesn't exist? Does this prove that faith is irrelevant, that God doesn't exist? No, it's just the opposite. What it proves is that the world is out there constantly vying for your attention, pulling you away from the truth, pulling you away from what is really real and authentic. And people buy into it constantly, all the time. And I'm constantly bombarded in my office with college students who come in who are just exhausted after seeking so many things in their life that aren't bringing them true happiness. And it's all the things that you guys, that the world says will make you happy. Do this with your body, do this with your mind, do this with your sexuality, do this, and they try it, and they're miserable. Now, I want to play a quick game with you. It's called Real or Unreal. I'm going to throw an image on the screen, and you tell me if it's real or if it's unreal. Okay, you got it? If you're with me, clap once, clap twice, clap 3 times. All right, here's the first image. All right, very simple. Real or unreal? Okay, it's a real sponge. I don't know if you use sponges. I don't. It's kind of random. I don't know if you know what a sponge is, but that's a sponge. I don't know if you sponge bathe. I'm not really into that. But if you do, fine. Go for it. Next image, real or unreal? Hang on. Well, we have a mixed crowd in here. We have some people who are like, it's unreal, and some people are like, it's real. Okay, for those of you people who think this is real, let me just explain to you, SpongeBob is not a real sponge, not a real person. I'm sorry. I know you probably woke up early in the morning, you turn on the TV, your parents are still sleeping, and you're a kid, you turn on Nickelodeon, there was SpongeBob, you learned how to talk, he kind of taught you all the lessons about life. SpongeBob is not a real person. All right, next image. Real or unreal? It's real. It's a real baby. Next image. It's unreal. This is an egg baby. All right, it's not a real baby. I'm sorry to say, my senior year in high school, no lie, we had this morality project where the teacher said, okay, class, here's what we're going to do. And she's all serious about life, right? She's like, we're going to have a morality project. This is really important. This is like, going to give you like a cumulative grade, and if you make a good grade, it's really going to be, it's important because we're going to average everything together. And, it's like the most important project we're going to do all year. And I'm like, this is amazing. I can't wait for this. So she walks around the classroom and she hands us eggs. It's like, what the heck am I going to do with an egg? She's like, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to draw a face and you're going to kind of decorate it, and it's going to be your baby. And you're going to take care of the egg baby for the week. And if you take care of the egg baby and treat it like a baby and don't crack it, then you'll get an A, I'm thinking, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, right? Like, this isn't even a real baby. Like, one day, like, am I going to grow up and, like, all of a sudden I'm going to have a real child and I'm going to be like, oh, I remember this. I had a baby once. It was an egg. This is coming in handy. So we're standing around like recess. It's like 2 days in the project, and I am fed up. I can't even believe that I am carrying a baby. Now, ladies, you got to understand, for most guys, this is ridiculous. Carrying around a baby in a little basket around your campus, it just looks weird. And so I'm standing around with some friends, and we're kind of all standing in a circle, a bunch of guys, and I just look around the circle. And when you kind of step back from a situation, just like, man, this is the weirdest thing I've ever been a part of. It's a bunch of like just senior guys about to graduate high school, going to college, standing around with egg babies. So I look over across the circle, and my friend David's got, got a little basket with his baby. I'm like, he looks crazy. So I was like, hey, David, and he looks at me, I go, and his egg goes, and he's like all serious. He's like, and he like dives for it. He's like, splat. And like just when I went to laugh, because I thought it was the most hysterical moment ever, my friend next to me hits my hand and goes, boom. My egg goes, boom. And the next thing he's like, boom, boom, boom. And eggs are just flying all around the campus, right? So it's like all like 10 of us, like we got called into the teacher's class, and she's just like fussing at us. We have our like broken eggs, yolk all over the place. Here's our babies. I remember asking her this question. She's like, what were you thinking? She's like, like this is like important project. And I remember saying to her, I was like, I don't understand the connection. I don't understand the connection between an egg. Yeah, I can make one. You treat an egg kind and don't break it, and one day maybe you won't break your own baby. I have no idea what the connection is. But honestly, what does this have to do with the truth that there are real children in the world? That there are real babies being born. They're not treated fairly. That they're real babies who are in the womb, who people say, it's okay to kill them. It's okay to murder them. They're not real because they're not out of the womb. They don't really exist. So we just think, oh, they're not really in there. But when you saw the image of the baby inside the womb, you're like, that's real. That's real. Next image. Real. This is a picture of one of my former teens, Confirmande. I was his sponsor. Sent me this picture. Every day I'll get a message from his mom saying, hey, pray for him. He's on tour, he's making rounds, he's in the trenches. It's real. It's really happening. We're disconnected from it because we're not there, We don't see it every day. We won't see the bullets whizzing by or the bombs exploding underneath, vehicles, but it's real. It's really happening. Next image. Because we can play these games, right? Nothing against these games, but we just kind of think, oh, this is real. We can explode people's heads off. You're like, come look at this. We're playing these games, and we really think that it has no effect. But this is exactly what the culture does. And I'm not talking specifically about video games, you guys. I'm talking about this idea that the culture throws out all these things to sort of say, it's not really real. You can dabble in all these things, and it's not going to have an effect on you at all. Next image. It's real. I mean, like as guys, we're like, man, that's an awesome hit. Look at that. Both those guys left with a concussion, couldn't get back into the game. We don't see that side of it, all right? Because this is what we do, the majority of us. Next image. Look how real that looks. That's not real. It's a video game. And this is the whole idea, you guys, is that we can step out into the world every day, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we'll receive small doses of things that seem real but aren't really real or true. The world will tell you that you can do what you want, when you want, and how you want to do it, and there are no consequences to your actions. We can watch movies, play video games, we can see things on the internet, and we think, oh, it's okay to do that. And we all know what that's like. We all see it. It's not like I'm talking to half the crowd in here. We all know that the culture is constantly drawing our attention and distracting us from what's really true, what's right. There's a word I want to talk about right now. It's called relativism. Relativism is this, and I'll put it on the screen so that you can see this and read it yourself. Relativism says this: there is no universal truth. Relativism means that there's no real truth. That it's just sort of, everything's relative. It's whatever you want to believe as true is true, but the person next to you can believe something else. So we get into subjective truth, which is this. We'll throw this up. Truth is whatever I believe. Now, I want you to use simply your reason and intellect here. You guys are all old enough. Just use your mind, your intellect, your conscience that God gave you, and begin to play out scenarios in your life. Now, imagine if I said to you, you can do whatever you want, and it doesn't matter. You would begin to say, well, okay, and then you would try some things or think about things. You're like, well, that's not really good for you. Well, why not? Well, I just don't think it's right. Well, why not? I don't think it's true. Well, why not? You see, subjective truth says whatever you believe and whatever you believe can be two different things. You can make up your own truth. So you could say, like it's okay for me to kill a baby, to have an abortion. It's okay for me because I don't think it's wrong. And then you could say, well, I think it is wrong, so I would never do that. I'm not going to do it. And so what happens is subjective truth says, well, what we're going to do is, in relativism, we're going to accept your truth and your truth. Well, I have to tell you guys, only one can be true. Only one. And this is the slippery slope. Because you can't just accept one truth and accept another truth. You can only accept one truth. And this is called objective truth. That truth actually exists, and it's based on the fact of an object. And when you see a baby, you say, that's a life. How could you kill it? But someone else might look at it as like, it's not a baby. It's okay. It's my choice. See, here's what's tough about being a Christian, you guys. And let's be honest about this. Because as Christians, we're called to proclaim God's love to the world. I got to be honest with you and vulnerable. I love every one of you in this room. I do. I really do. Yeah. Every youth minister and leader, I guarantee you, they are here this weekend because they love you. None of us are in this for money because we don't make any. We don't do this for fame because there's none. We don't do this for recognition. We simply do this because we absolutely love teenagers and would do anything for them. Completely. But just because I love you doesn't mean I'm going to let you do whatever you want to do. So if someone's on a cliff, your best friend, and they look at you and say, I'm going to jump, and you're like, well, I love you, so I'm going to accept that. Go ahead, jump. You see, love says, I love you even though you're on a cliff. I love you even though you're thinking about maybe killing yourself. But I am not going to let you jump because it's not good for you. I love you that much to tell you the truth. And this is the reality, you guys. Is that as Christians, we're called to love, but we're also called to tell the truth because the truth is what sets people free. But oftentimes as Christians, we're blamed and we're told that we hate people because we tell them the truth, and that is not the reality. We're often told, you're not tolerant, or you don't love people because you don't think what they're doing is okay. And I'm like, well, wait, hang on. It's okay to love someone and disagree with them. It's okay to love someone and even die for someone and not agree with them. Because Jesus loved everyone. And even in our own dysfunction, disease, and death, got up on the cross and made a capital T with his arms and said, this is the truth. That I'll love everyone, but I don't have to agree with what they do. I don't have to agree with it at all. And this is the tough part, you guys, because as Christians, we're called to not only love, but we're called to help people know the truth and live the truth. I have kids myself. You imagine if I went to my own kids and said, hey guys, guess what? Dad's got a new rule. Y'all can do whatever you want. Be party in the house until someone got hurt. And then they would come to me and say, Dad, you didn't tell me I was going to get hurt. You're like, yeah, I love you, but I just don't care about you. I love you, I just don't care about you. It doesn't work that way. Not only do we have to love, but we have to care enough about people that we can help navigate their life to the truth. I remember a friend of mine, he called me. He's a dad. He was at home. His wife was away for the weekend. So guys, as dads, when we get older, we have different rules than moms. So all the young ladies in here, just know that when you get married one day and you have kids, your rules and dad's rules are just different, and the way they kind of handle things when mom's gone is just different. Like when I'm watching the kids and my wife's there, it's just different, And so he calls me, he's like, hey man, come on over, grab dinner. He goes, my wife's out of town, I got the kids, and he had a ton of kids, and they are all young and little, And so I was like, I'll swing by, So I swung by and I'm knocking on the door, and nobody answers. And I know they're in there because I can hear the kids like running around, screaming, hollering, just doing the thing. And he's apparently in the back of the house. I didn't know at the time. So I walk in the door, and his son's he has one son and some little girls, 3 or 4 little girls. His son's like sitting on the kitchen floor naked. He's 3 years old. Now, 3-year-old kids, especially guys, naked all the time. All the time. My son, Jacob, when he was a kid in diapers, naked all the time. He would like take off outside the front door. He's naked. Like, running after him. I mean, to the point where my wife and I had to duct tape his diaper on him because he would just rip it off. He'd just be like, my wife's like, what is that? I was like, he's a guy. He's like, guys do that? Yeah, guys just do that. Guys do that. So I walk in the house, and I'm thinking, little kids, you never know what you're going to expect. Like food everywhere, kids naked, running around. It's just kind of part of the deal. And his son's sitting on the kitchen floor. And we're all adults here, so we can kind of understand this. And he's got like his hand on his like private part. I was like, hey, buddy, what are you doing? Like, dad's not around, right? Like kids are running around. He's like, I'm trying to pull my penis off. Yeah. That's what I said. Like when a kid says something and it's so funny, but you don't want to laugh. I was like, oh my God, that is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. So you try to get like your whole face back together, so you turn around and be like, oh, okay. So I was like, oh God, how am I going to handle this? So it's like, oh, buddy, tell me about that. Right? You're like trying to handle this, kids. And it's like, oh, okay. Tell me about that. This is what he said. It was like this cutest moment. Like, he's just a kid, 3. He's like, oh, I was trying to pull my penis off because, my sisters don't have one. Yeah, no lie. Like, no lie. Now, we've all heard, body parts. And he was just dead serious. Like, he just didn't even know that. He was just like, ah. So I was like, Can I give you a piece of advice here? Just a little advice. You may not want to do that. Don't do it. Now, you imagine if I'd been like, go for it. You'd be like, that's crazy. Why would you tell a kid that? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't tell him that. We literally live in a world, you guys, where sort of it's no longer okay to be male and female either. We can change our genders. And I know this is a big struggle for many people. But the reality is that God has created every one of us, like Ralph said last night, individually in his image and likeness, as man and woman, uniquely. And we're created for a reason and with a purpose. And it's okay at oftentimes that we maybe struggle, or we know people who struggle with these realities. But it's also okay to draw people back to the truth of who God created them to be. It's okay to say, you know what, God's got a plan and a purpose for your life. In college applications now, because I deal with this all the time. There are many universities that you can check, write your name, where you're from, where you graduated high school, your GPA, and you can write in there, male, female, or other. And I'm not saying that people don't struggle with that, because I meet with people who do. But what I'm saying is that the world's saying that there's other options that aren't good for you. There's things out there that we're buying into that aren't good for you. Sort of like just telling my kids, you can just surf the internet anytime you want. no boundaries. Are you kidding me? My daughter asked me the other day, Dad, why don't you let me just look wherever I want? Like, she doesn't know. I said, Marie, how would you feel if I picked you up right now and I brought you and dropped you in the middle of New York City? No map, no directions, no money. How would you feel? She said, I'd feel lost. I said, would you feel protected? No. Do you feel like you would get hurt? Yes. I was like, that's like just letting me drop you in the middle of the internet and say, do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. Are you crazy? You guys, the world is constantly opening up doors and avenues and saying, just walk through. And what happens is as soon as you take a step, it's a slippery slope that you just slide down, and all of a sudden you feel like you're way too far down the road. And Jesus says specifically that the truth is what sets us free. Not the absence of the truth, not half-truth, not a counterfeit of the truth, but the truth. It's the truth that sets us free. And the more and more that we can begin to kind of orient our hearts to the truth, instead of running away from it, being afraid to receive the truth of God in our life. Here's the reality, you guys. Every one of you, you have a purpose. Every one of you. God created you for a reason. God made you specifically in his image and likeness to do great things in his name. God did not make you just sort of wander around the world thinking, I have no purpose, no reason for existing. That's not true. And many of us oftentimes begin to wander away from the truth. And the further and further we get from it, the harder it is to hear. You know what? But there's hope. There's hope, you guys. There's hope in Jesus Christ. You know, there was a time in my life where I wandered so far away from the truth. And by the time I got into high school, if you name the sin, I did it. You could shout it out loud and be like, done it, been there, saw it, grabbed it, whatever you want. Boom. And I remember like I was just moving so far away because you know what? No one had the courage to tell me right from wrong. No one had the courage to tell me that my body was created for a reason, for a purpose, that it had meaning. No one told me any of these things. And I remember one day I had an encounter with a person who had the guts to tell me. He came to me and said, Paul, he goes, I just want to tell you something right now. I was like, okay. He goes, I want to tell you that God's got a plan for your life. And when he said it, it just kind of moved right past me. But it was like one of those words that just kind of whipped back around. And he goes, I also want to tell you this. He goes, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to miss his plan. I was like, okay, you got my attention. And he goes, I also want to tell you this, that you have a lot to offer, but you're offering it in the wrong ways. It's like, man, you're brave, dude. And he goes, I also want to tell you this. He goes, one day you might have the opportunity to meet a really amazing woman and get married. But he goes, the direction that you're going right now, you're never going to meet her. He goes, I want to tell you that sex, your body was created for a reason, and sex was meant for marriage. You know, it was the first time somebody ever told me that. You know that? I was 16 years old in high school. It was the first time I ever heard that premarital sex was not good for me. You know what? When he said those words, all the truth that he said, when it hit me, it made sense. It was hard to hear because I was living in sin and I was far away from the truth. But when he said it, it made sense. Why? Because you guys, our hearts were created for truth. Our hearts were created for God. And when truth is spoken to us, we receive it because our hearts are oriented to move towards God. And sometimes we move away, but the truth draws us back. And as soon as he said those words, all of a sudden in my life, there was a small crack that began to open up, and my heart began to navigate to God, and I began to ask questions about God. And I began to move away from all those sinful ways back to God where I belonged. And all of us in this room are created for that relationship, that loving relationship where God brings us in. But it's also in that relationship that God reveals his truth to us. And it's not a relationship that we're called to run from, but to run to, because God's constantly running towards us and grabbing hold of us. Don't run from it. Don't run from it, even if it hurts, even if the truth is sort of like, oh, wow. We just did a retreat on our college campus for all these students who had been far away from God. And many of them haven't been to church in years. We did sort of an outreach specifically to students who don't go to church. Now, can imagine who came on this retreat. We had about 150 college students. Probably 70 to 80% don't go to church. It was different. And we offered confessions. You guys, it got so hot in that room. And I remember there was this young priest there, and I said, Father, I just want to let you know something. I said, these are going to be really tough confessions. And he goes, oh, I got this. Don't worry about it. You guys, everybody went to confession. And if they weren't Catholic, they went talk to the priest. It was crazy. About halfway through, this young priest walked out of the room where he's hearing confessionals, and I watched him. He walked out, and he went and he grabbed a box of Kleenex. And I was like, oh, how sweet of him. He's going to bring it to the person he's hearing confession to, you know? And he closed the door. The next person walked in. I saw him later that night. It's like, Father, how was it? You okay? And he goes, I've only cried twice in my priesthood. He said, the day that I got ordained, and he goes, tonight. He goes, I've never heard confessions so powerful of people who are so far away that are coming back. And he goes, it reminded me of God's love and mercy that we can never journey far enough away that God's truth won't draw us back. And he started crying again. You guys, the challenge for us is to begin to orient our hearts to receive God's truth. And as Christians, to begin to take that truth and to not be afraid to proclaim it to the world in love, so that other people can be set free and know God's truth, love, and freedom for their own life. Now, can you imagine if all 5,000 of us in this room went out into the world and just talked to people about God's love and truth for their life? What a difference that would make.